frente al crimen más grande y monstruoso que se está cometiendo en el siglo XXI. No podemos callar, no callaremos. Venezuela seguirá hablando con su propia voz para decir ¡alto al genocidio contra el pueblo palestino! ¡Cese de fuego en Gaza! ¡Basta de bombardeo! ¡Basta de asesinato! ¡Paz para Palestina!
On behalf of the people of Venezuela, I would like to thank Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, for his recognition of Juan Guaidó as the interim President of Venezuela. Prime Minister Netanyahu joins our many allies in the hemisphere and the world in welcoming Venezuela back to the bloc of Western democratic nations that oppose despot and oppression. We certainly have a common enemy with Israel. That's why we, the Venezuelan people, look forward to the reestablishment of diplomatic relations with the State of Israel. I myself look forward to visit the State of Israel as soon as we conquer freedom. We will prevail.
Maria Corina Machado, gracias. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you, and we'll stay in touch. And I promise one day we'll have a close relationship between Venezuela and Israel. And I believe, and I can announce this, that our government will move our Israeli embassy to Jerusalem. That will be part of our support to the state of Israel.
Creíble, una amenaza severa y una amenaza inminente. Y esa única amenaza que los hace ceder es la de uso de la fuerza internacional.
Si quiere preservar su vida, debe entender que llegó la hora de aceptar que el tiempo se les acabó.
Venezuela. When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
Born of Venezuela's old ruling caste, wired into Atlantis' power networks, an open disciple of Thatcher and with ambitions likened to Pinochet, Machado has spent decades waging war on her own country. She's orchestrated boycotts, lobbied for sanctions and blockades against her own people in a conscious effort to drive Venezuelans into despair in the hope that they would overthrow the very government that they elected time and time again.
Hay una mano invisible, el mercado que todo lo arregla. Mentira, mentira, mil veces mentira. Claro que hay otros caminos y en Venezuela lo estamos demostrando.
Machado was the final piece on the chessboard of Washington's war on Venezuela, a pawn promoted into a queen by the United States, which has always considered Venezuela its backyard and treated its natural resources as spoils for American corporations. But in 1998, Venezuelans elected a man who shattered that order, Hugo Chavez. He launched a revolutionary movement that reclaimed the nation's wealth from foreign capital and redirected it to the poor, breaking the cycle in which US profits just trickled down to Venezuela's old upper classes. Chavez was the commander of the Bolivarian Revolution. Chavez ran for election again in 2000 as a result of a referendum he proposed to make Venezuela's constitution more democratic. He introduced electronic voting, extended polling stations into the forgotten barrios that sprawled across the hillsides, and built a system so transparent that even foreign observers like Jimmy Carter declared it the freest and fairest in the world. New electoral bodies and recall clauses were introduced, clauses later weaponized against Chavez in 2004 by Machado. But this was hardly her first attempt to overthrow him. It was simply her first legal one. 2 years earlier, in 2002, Machado openly endorsed the illegal coup that temporarily ousted Chavez.
Se ha decidido que la Fuerza Armada mantenga en custodia al presidente saliente, al presidente Chávez, y que se conforme entonces en lo inmediato un gobierno de transición.
Carmona Estanga, en mi condición de presidente de la República de Venezuela.
Se suspende de sus cargos a los diputados principales y suplentes a la Asamblea Nacional. Se destituyen de sus cargos al presidente y demás magistrados del Tribunal Supremo de Justicia, así como al fiscal general de la República, al Contralor General de la República, al Defensor del Pueblo y a los miembros del Consejo Nacional Electoral.
By signing the Machado family friend Pedro Carmona's self-declaration as unelected president, she became complicit in dismantling Venezuela's democratic institutions, fabricated media narratives, and applaud from broadcasters, among them figures like Leopoldo López, later one of her closest allies, was central to this three-day assault on democracy.
Tenemos nuevo presidente. Y nosotros tenemos que decir, tanto Venevisión como RCTV, gracias Televen, gracias CMT, gracias Globovisión.
When Chavez survived, Machado pleaded ignorance, that she just thought she was signing in, unaware of the global news that a coup was underway in Venezuela. But Venezuelans demanded the return of Chavez. The oil revenues he directed into housing, schools and hospitals had built loyalty in the country's poor majority.
Venezuela is important because they're the third largest supplier of petroleum. I would say that Mr. Chavez, and the State Department may say this, probably doesn't have the interests of the United States at heart.
Concerned with some of the actions of Venezuelan President Chavez and his understanding of what a democratic system is all about.
They descended from the hills and filled the streets. The coup lasted just 2 days and collapsed under the weight of popular resistance. Frustrated by their waning influence, the middle and upper classes rallied behind private media narratives in a campaign to gather signatures for a recall referendum aimed at removing Chavez legally. At the forefront of this effort stood Machado's NGO, Sumate, which received tens of thousands of dollars in US funding. Yet from the failed coup of 2002 to the referendum of 2004, the opposition made no genuine transition towards peaceful or democratic means of contesting power. Among those implicated in the coup was Enrique Capriles, grandson of Miguel Capriles, founder of the powerful media conglomerate Cadena Capriles, who at the time served as mayor of Baruta. During the coup, Capriles' municipal police detained Chavez as interior minister, while violent mobs besieged the Cuban embassy, cutting off water, electricity, shattering windows, and trapping the Cuban ambassador inside. During peace negotiations between Chavez and the opposition, mediated by the Organization of American States, an explosion struck a building belonging to the National Electoral Council, the constitutional body overseeing elections. Chavez blamed 2 former National Guard officers who fled to the US. Despite Venezuela's extradition requests, US authorities dropped the charges against them at the behest of the State Department. Prosecutor Danilo Anderson was subsequently appointed to investigate Capriles among hundreds of alleged conspirators in the 2002 coup. However, in 2004, before completing his investigation, Anderson was assassinated by a car bomb. Capriles, whose privileged background afforded him deep political and media connections, would later re-emerge as one of Machado's closest allies, and as the opposition candidate against both Chavez and Maduro in subsequent elections. Enough signatures were collected to trigger the recall referendum established under Venezuela's new constitution, and the vote went ahead, with 59% of people voting no to annulling his presidential term. Chavez won decisively and remained in office. Jimmy Carter criticised Machado's organisation for manipulating the outcome through biased polling and certified the process as free and fair. Chavez had won, and 2 more decisive elections followed. In 2005, Machado flew to the White House to meet with the Bush administration. Upon her return, the Venezuelan opposition, further drifting into extremism, boycotted legislative elections, handing Chavez's party a landslide, and then in 2006, he won re-election to the presidency. Contrary to Machado's narrative to frame Chavez as a dictator, Venezuelan democracy was not dying, it was thriving. Voter participation surged, with turnout jumping more than 15 percentage points, compared to pre-Chavez levels, reaching 74%. Across Latin America, Chavez's democratic revival inspired countries to follow his lead. The results were undeniable. According to the UN, the World Bank, the US Congressional Research Service, and independent studies such as CEPA, Chavez's policies cut poverty in half, reduced extreme poverty by 2/3, and significantly narrowed inequality, even amid the 2008 global recession. In 2012, he was re-elected once more, with voter turnout hitting 80% compared to just 58% in Barack Obama's US election that same year. Machado also ran as a candidate on a popular capitalism platform, but only won 3.6% of the vote. But the celebrations wouldn't last. Chavez was weakened by a mysterious illness, one that even Maduro hinted could be the result of a bioweapon. Machado smelled blood. The revolutionary constitution stipulated that upon the death of a president, a new election had to be called. Chavez urged his loyal base to support Maduro if the worst came to pass.
5 de la tarde de hoy 5 de marzo ha fallecido el comandante presidente Hugo Chávez Frías.
Porque nuestro comandante tenía desde adentro el escudo más poderoso que puede tener un ser humano, que es su pureza, su verdad, su escudo de pureza, de amor de Cristo, de hijo verdadero de Cristo, lo salvó de la injuria, de la infamia, y aquí está invicto, puro, transparente, único, verdadero, vivo, para siempre, para todos los tiempos, para este y todos los tiempos futuros. Comandante, no pudieron contigo, no podrán con nosotros jamás, jamás podrán.
Maduro was immediately thrust into a high-stakes election campaign, tasked with preserving the legacy of Chavez through Venezuelan democracy, keeping the country's natural resources in the hands of the people, and most importantly surviving every form of attack by Washington and its chess pieces inside Venezuela like Machado. His main opposition was again Enrique Capriles, who felt he had a second chance having lost to Chavez the previous year. Capriles performed better than expected, but still fell short. The electoral body independently carried out an audit and confirmed Maduro's slim majority, just as Carter condemned Machado in the 2004 referendum and concluded in 2012 that Venezuela's system was the freest and fairest in the world.
As a matter of fact, of the 92 elections that we've monitored, I would say that the election process in Venezuela is the best in the world.
The Carter Center's concluding report said that Capriles and Machado boycotted the official fingerprint audit and rejected the audit's outcome before it even concluded. Capriles, along with Machado and Lopez, refused to recognize the result. What followed was the next phase in a campaign to overthrow Venezuela's democracy. Their violence was not new, but the self-declared enemies of Chavez and now Maduro increasingly sought to involve what Machado called the international dimension, taking more than just money, intelligence and protection from the US and its satellites. This time, it was an attack upon the economy. The cost was nothing less than the destruction of Venezuela.
No basta con ganar elecciones. Hay que llevar adelante una lucha organizada, firme, ciudadana en las calles. Hay que lograr que esa presión se sienta, porque al final es lo que hace que el costo político se incremente y que las instituciones reaccionen. De modo que la aproximación tiene que ser simultáneamente en estas dos vías, con una tercera dimensión, que es la dimensión internacional.